All right, Tina, I see that it has turned 7 PM. Are we ready to go?
We are.
All right, I would like to call the Tuesday, April 26th, 2022 meeting of the Woburn Planning Board to order, please. Karen, could you call the roll?
Mr. Jim Callahan?
Here.
Mr. Bob Doherty?
Here.
Mr. Kevin Donovan?
Here.
Mr. Dave Edmonds?
Here.
Ms. Carolyn Turner?
Here.
Mr. Mike Ventresca?
Here.
Chair Claudia Bogan?
Here. Before this meeting begins, I'd like to ask everyone in the room to silence your cell phones and to note that this meeting is being recorded. All right, first on the agenda is a subdivision approval not required plan, 202-204 School Street. Kevin Parley is the petitioner.
Yes, Madam Chairman and members of the board, we have an A&R plan this evening that would modify the lot line between two existing building lots. After the movement of the line, both of the lots, which are in the R2 district, would exceed the minimum frontage requirement. One would have 128.63 feet of frontage on School Street, and the other would have 101.68 feet. The minimum is 100. So it meets the board's requirements for A&R plans, and staff therefore recommends you endorse it as an A&R.
So moved. Second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I would call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. 7 in favor, none opposed. That is endorsed. All right, second on the agenda, public hearing continued, roadway improvement plan, 0 Village Street. The applicant is Frederick J. Gonzalez.
Yes, members of the board and audience, the planning board is in the midst of a public hearing on this one-lot definitive subdivision plan filing. The public hearing had been continued from a previous meeting to this evening, but the applicant has requested an extension or a continuance of the public hearing to the second meeting of the board in May, which would be May 24, 2022. The reason for that is that there's a legal issue that has a question that's been raised that needs to be vetted, and they weren't able to do that before tonight's meeting. It may take a little while to work through the issues, so they've asked for the hearing to be continued to the 24th at 7 p.m. In order for the board to do that, the board needs to get an extension of time from the applicant. As with all subdivisions, there's a period of time within which you must make a decision. The time clock begins on the date of application. The deadline would have been, or is, at the moment, May 2nd, 2022. So the attorney, Mark Salvati, for the petitioner, has asked that the period of time within which the board must act on this filing, he's assented to and is requesting an extension to June 2nd, 2022.
All right, so my understanding then, Tina, is that were the board to agree, there would be first a motion to accept the extension of time offered by the petitioner to June 2nd, and then that would be voted on. And then there would be a separate vote to continue the public hearing on this filing to our May 24th, 2022 meeting.
That's correct.
Is that correct? All right. Is there any discussion with respect to the board? Hearing none, I'd certainly entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant the extension of time
All right.
from
To,
the petitioner to, was it June 20?
no, June 2nd.
June 2nd?
All right, a motion has been made by Mike to grant the extension of time requested by the petitioner for action on this plan to June 2nd, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would call for a vote, please. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. 2, 3. I have 7 in favor and none opposed.
I'd like to also make a motion that we continue the public hearing until May 2nd, 2022.
May 24.
Getting these all mixed up.
May 24, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Yes,
All right, motion has been made by Mike to continue the public hearing to May 24th, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Carolyn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I would call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. I have 7 in favor, none opposed. That motion carries. This matter stands continued to May 24th, 2022 at 7 p.m. All right, next on the agenda is a public hearing, proposed zoning amendment to amend sections 13 and 28 of the 1985 City of Woburn zoning ordinance as amended to allow for off-site directional signage and solar photovoltaic systems in the technology and business mixed-use overlay district. Attorney Tarby, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good to be back live here at City Hall. For the record, Joseph Tarby, Woburn Redmond here on behalf of the applicant Montfield Land LLC. Before I get started, I'd like to submit a few documents that I'm going to be referencing during my presentation. So I have 8 copies here, I believe. I emailed one as well.
All right. Yes, is there a motion to accept into the public record?
So moved.
Motion by Dave, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. All in favor? 7 in favor, none opposed. That motion carries. Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so the documents that I've submitted are one, a document entitled Exhibit A, which was the Exhibit A that we included as on the petition to amend the zoning. This has the exact language as submitted. The second document shows 2 proposed freestanding signs, the one on the left on the AL Prime property and the one on the right on the McDonald's property. And then the next document is a plan that just, shows you the proposed signage types and the sizes of the signs, all numbered. Some of these, 2 of the signs are signs that are on site, that are not subject to this zoning amendment, but signs 2 and 3 would be those that would be off-site, if you will, just showing you the proposed locations of where we'd like to see off-premise signage. And then Section 26, I included Section 26, which is the ordinance that addresses the solar installations that we've incorporated by reference into the proposed zoning amendments. So, as I said, I represent Montfield Land LLC, which is a subsidiary of Legg & McCall Properties of 10 Post Office Square in Boston. And although, there was no special permit before the planning board this evening, we did submit these documents and we will refer to them. In the event that you have site-specific questions, Chad Reynolds is with me. Chad's Executive Vice President and partner at Legg & McCall Properties. Next Tuesday, the City Council has its public hearing scheduled on this matter. And before I get into the request, I thought it would be beneficial if I just reviewed the status of where things are with the Vail development. As you know, the Vail development represents the largest redevelopment parcel that has become available inside Route 128 in the last 15 years. It's a mixed-use development, a Class A office, lab, research, development, biomanufacturing, retail, and residential uses. So the redevelopment of the Atlantic Gelatin Facility. One fulfills the mayor's goals of business and technology, provides much-needed environmental remediation work on that site, creates new job opportunities, and spurs economic development in the city of Woburn. The housing on the Vale includes senior housing and owner-occupied townhomes and condominiums, including 30 affordable owner-occupied affordable housing units. There are landscape open spaces on the site that will encourage public use and enjoyment of the site while preserving 28 acres of undeveloped open space and natural resource areas that provide an undeveloped buffer between the development and the Abajona riverfront area, and then with a new connection to between the site and the Tri-Community Greenway. At full build-out of the Vale, the estimated annual tax revenues are $6 million per year. On top of that would be the equipment taxes that are assessed by the city of Woburn on business equipment, and with labs, research and development, and GMP manufacturing, there'll be a lot of sophisticated equipment that will generate hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional taxes. So to date, the following approvals have been issued by the City Council. On June 10th of 2021, a special permit was issued to LCS Woburn LLC, allowing for 103 congregate elderly housing units and an extended care facility with 84 assisted living units, 36 memory care units. Site work and building construction is underway for that development. On June 22nd of 2021, a special permit was issued to Pulte Homes of New England, allowing for 75 townhome dwellings and 122 multifamily garden-style units, and 2 36-unit buildings and 1 50-unit building. All the units will be owner-occupied, with 30 of the units being affordable. Site work is underway for that development. On August 5th of 2021, City Council granted site plan approval to MGB, allowing for a 62,000 square foot medical office building. That proposal was recently withdrawn by MGB from consideration by the Department of Public Health, and that project will not be going forward. On January 4th of this year, site plan approval, special permit was issued to Montfield Land LLC for approximately 881,364 square feet of research, testing, lab use, and approximately 130,256 square feet of CMGP biomanufacturing use, along with amenity retail, personal service establishments that would include restaurant, fast food, in a single 10-story square foot amenity building, as well as on some of the first floor space of the lab and development buildings. So the amendments that are before you seek the following. One, to allow for up to 2 off-site freestanding wayfinding signs that have been a part of the overall traffic mitigation plan for this development. I'll get into that a little further in my presentation. Secondly, to allow for dimensional regulations for those signs that are identical to the dimensional regulations allowed in the B1 zoning district for a freestanding sign with a maximum height of 30 feet and a sign face of up to 100 square feet on each side of the plan. Although the BI zoning district does allow for 1 freestanding sign with that, this ordinance seeks to allow for an off-premise signs with the same size. And we've also made a request to restate section 28.3 of the T-Bod to allow for the City Council to allow for other accessory uses by special permit. And then we've asked to incorporate into the T-Bod section 26 entitled Solar Photovoltaic. I have the same problem, Claudia, with that word. installations which govern solar energy systems in all the zoning districts in the city of Woburn, including residential zones, but none of the open space zoning district, with one revision, which would be to eliminate setback requirements with any yard abutting I-93. So what I want to do is just run down each one of those requests in a little more detail. So as you know, the Vale development is one of the most significant developments in the city of Woburn in recent times. While it has a presence on I-93, it will not have a presence on Montfield Avenue. The lack of signage to identify the Vale and some of the major property owners, LCS owns their property, Pulte owns their property, and some of the major tenants will help with the overall traffic mitigation. If there's no signage out on Montfield Avenue, there's a good chance that visitors, employees, guests will drive by the site in either direction, resulting in them having to turn around in other properties on Montfield Avenue and back, finding themselves back to the Vale. We haven't requested any signage that's in excess in terms of size and height than what's allowed in the BI zoning district. On the request to restate, and amend section 28.3 of the T-Bod. One of the reasons we filed this petition was because of conflicting language in the T-Bod. Section 28.5 of the T-Bod states in part that, except as specifically provided herein, uses and provisions of the zoning ordinance relating to the underlying zoning district not otherwise impacted by this section shall continue to remain in full force and effect. After one of the approved developments in the Vale inquired about solar energy systems being allowed under section 28.5, we discussed that with the building commissioner, who said that section 28.6.3 of the T-Bod, which states in part, any use not expressly authorized by section by this section is not permitted. And that prevented him from allowing solar energy systems in the T-Bod and suggested that we file a zoning amendment. So the proposed zoning amendment, which we filed, agreed to limit to accessory uses only and not principal uses that would allow other accessory uses, but only by special permit from the city council. And this language is important. If, in its opinion, such change or accessory use shall result in an improved project and will not nullify or substantially derogate from the intent or purposes and objectives of this section. This language would eliminate every time that there's a proposed accessory use for us having to come back and ask for a zoning amendment. It would allow the city council to approve that by special permit after full presentation. Now, I haven't thought of every potential accessory use, but you could have a situation where there's a food truck, or the development wants to put in an ice rink for the tenants and residents, pickleball court, satellite dishes, just to name a few. And then the third request with the solar installations. While we understand the concern about the solar canopies on Wildwood Street, the city council had no concern with solar canopies that they approved at 160 Olympia Avenue. Site plan approval was granted to the Nardone Electrical Company on February 2nd, 2021 for solar canopies. In that particular case, they liked the design that was proposed, and it was a good design. So, rather than not allow solar canopies at all under this, I'm suggesting that we move from our request, which was to allow it by site plan review approval, to have it allowed by special permit through the city council. You know, as you know, there are benefits to the solar canopies. We were informed by the engineering firm that was working on solar canopies for the withdrawn medical office building that solar canopies covering approximately 150 cars would generate over 2 million kBTUs a year, which would power lighting and plug loads for that sophisticated 62,000 square foot building. They indicated that that would be equivalent to the carbon emissions from over 1 million miles of car journeys per year, which is significant in, you know, the way this country is moving. As for the roof-mounted solar systems, you know, we're asking that not be changed. In addition, all four approvals that were issued by the city council contain language that states the proponent, that being Leggett McCall, is committed to requiring developers and end users to construct solar reading roof space for potential PV installations on building rooftops as feasible. So we're asking that language not be changed. And then finally, getting to the three issues again, I just want to clarify that the off-premises signage is not being proposed to advertise any business in the VO, but it's to identify the address and name one or more of the developments within the T-Bod. We'd like to be able to identify up to, 6 property owners / tenants on the sign. So, for example, the senior housing development is called the Delaney. We'd like to see something like the Delaney at the Vale, Pulte Homes. If it happened to be Moderna or Pfizer, just for identification purposes. Further, there's no intention to seek approval for multiple signs along Hill Street. The intention is to be able to install 1 or 2 signs for the reasons I previously stated and at the locations on the plans that I've shown you. Signage is necessary out on Montfield Avenue for people to find the Vale, and has been part of our overall, traffic mitigation to get people into the site since we started this project. As I indicated on previously, on the solar-related provisions, we're requesting that the solar canopies be allowed by special permit and, change to roof-mounted solar systems. And then on the last request, there's a reason I provided the Exhibit A is because when, legal notices that are in the paper, don't, repeat every bit of language that are in the actual request, just to give people notice generally of what is being requested. So what we submitted was not an amendment to allow any land use in the T-Bod by special permit, but language that would allow the city council by special permit to an accessory use not otherwise permitted by section 28.6.1.19, in either event by special permit if in its opinion such change or accessory use shall result in an improved project will not nullify or substantially derogate from the intent or purposes and objectives of this section. So it's pretty clear that this would only be an accessory use that's not set forth in the T-Bod. Council would have to grant the special permit, and they would have to find that use would meet the standards under the section 28.3. So that's a summary of what we've requested and the reasons why we've made the requests.
All right, thank you for that presentation. Perhaps it makes sense to have any questions that board members may have directed to Attorney Tarby asked now, and then I can open the public hearing if anyone in the public would like to speak. Are there any questions for Attorney Tarby? Mike?
Yeah, to the applicant through the chair, what currently is allowed on the entrance to Montville Ave?
Well, I'm sorry?
What, right now, what's allowed on the entrance from Montville Ave into the Vale?
For the Vale?
Yeah,
Nothing.
nothing is allowed right now.
No.
I can kind of understand why one side would be, advantageous for your client, but is it written such that each tenant could have their own sign out there?
No. It would be one monument sign, and we're requesting the ability to, put, 6 different businesses
So on the
on.
one sign, it would be each, whatever's in there,
Right.
have their own spot on the one sign.
Correct. It wouldn't advertise, product or anything, it would just be the name.
Just the name of the business,
Correct, yeah.
similar to what's on the Woburn Mall in front there, but not as large.
Yeah, that just has listed the name of the business, correct.
Okay.
Are you good? All right, any other questions?
So
Go
a little
ahead.
clarification through the chair. Your items 2 and 3 on your drawing depict 2 signs at the mouth nearest Montville Ave. Hill, Montville. One seems to be a substantial, 15 foot long, 5 foot high, and the other one should be about 10.5 feet high by 6.5 feet. Didn't you just say you only have one sign there?
No, I said we want the ability to have up to 2 signs, 1 or 2 signs.
My bad.
Right. And just so you know, the Stantec sign plan was submitted during the last site plan review process, just to give the council an idea. There was a request made during the hearing process that we provide wayfinding signage, so the numbers you see on the site, would be the wayfinding signage. And then 2 and 3 are the 2 proposed locations for off-premises signage out towards Montville Avenue. So, the detail on the right, that was at that time. The, proposal would meet what we've submitted, no higher than 30 feet, and the sign face being no more than 100 square feet. So location 3 is down at the very end of the ALM Prime property. And number 2 would be on the easterly side of the McDonald's property. So as part of this whole process, just so you're aware of it, the McCall is rebuilding the commuter lot that you see hugging along Hill Street. There's a tri-party agreement between Mass DOT, the City of Woburn, and McCall. It's been executed, recorded at the registry, where they're going to expand the Mass DOT lot, so there'll be a lot more parking for commuters going to Boston. As you enter McDonald's now, at that front, entrance, a curb cut, that's 2-way traffic. And to avoid having there be backups on Hill Street, that's going to be a 1-way in, and then there's going to be another in and out built behind the building to move traffic a lot quicker off that site, not have it back up. So that's why you see that number 2 sign being located on the easterly side of the McDonald's property.
Jim, are you set?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Oh, Dave?
Yeah, when I look at the signs, they're surface signs, but you said 30 feet. What would be 30 feet? That's the highest the top of the sign could be?
That would be the top of the sign, and I'm not even sure we're even gonna go that high, we'll probably We just used what the requirements were in the BI zoning district. So we would have the right to go up 30 feet, the top of the sign. We don't have to go 30 feet.
So how many square feet did you say the sign would be?
100 square feet.
So that would be 10 by 10 approximately.
In theory, yes, yep.
So that means you could actually put the sign 20 feet off the ground, right? If it could go up to 30 feet high. So what I'm looking at is two surface signs, but potentially we could have a sign on stanchions that were 20 feet high to bring the sign up to 30 feet, right? So how do we know that that won't be what we'll end up with? Because I've been on this board a long time, and sometimes the description we get isn't exactly what we end up with. So are you saying that the signs, the pictures that you have here is what those signs would be, surface-mounted signs?
Do you want to address that, Chad?
Good evening, everyone. Chad Reynolds from Lega McCall Properties, and I do understand your question, and I think the intent, Joe, of using the 30 feet was to stay consistent with in-place language. The sign to the right, that's 5 by 20, is more in keeping with our intent. That, in fact, is our intent, a lower, granite monument-type sign. And we don't have any intention to have, if the sign were to be on the other side, to have it be that high up in the air. And if we needed to work on language, we could do that.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about us not ending up with something.
If we capped it at no higher than 10 feet, should it be there, that, something like that would be fine with us to allay those concerns.
Okay. And I just have a question on the photovoltaic. Did I get it right?
You got it.
Beautiful.
We'll
What
call
was
it-
that again?
Photovoltaic.
Photovoltaic, we'll call it PV.
Okay.
So is there anything that you're requesting that could change PV in any other part of the city?
No, we're just dealing with the overlay.
Right, but there's nothing that,
No.
in
No.
that language, that could be interpreted to allow something else to happen some other place in the city?
No, no.
Okay,
Yep.
I always get afraid about.
No, I understand, yeah.
I'm good.
All right, you're good? All right, Bob.
Yes, I need this dumbed down for me. So the way it stands now, the regulations that we have do not allow you to put any signs out there, correct?
Correct, and I,
Okay. That's no-
what's that?
So it doesn't allow you to put any signs out there?
Off premises, correct.
Premises?
Yep.
Okay, so what you're proposing is, through the change, would allow you to put off-premise signs? No more than 2?
That's what we're requesting, no more than
Okay.
2.
The land that these signs will go on, who owns the land?
Okay, McDonald's owns their property, McDonald's Corporation.
Okay,
And then a real estate entity for AL Prime owns their property.
so the next, if this goes through, you'd have to get some kind of agreement with them
Correct,
to allow, for them to allow you to put the signs on there.
correct.
Okay. But right now, the way it is, you can't put any signs on Montville Ave.
Correct, the way the T-bar, and it's probably, one of those things that we missed along the way when it was being adopted.
Yeah, I'm guessing that is what happened. Okay, because I do think, like, those 2 signs are beautiful, that are in the picture, not that that's necessarily gonna be what they are, but, I am of the thought that you probably do need to have something out there, which to keep, and in your, what you had mentioned earlier, just to keep less confusion. People driving around looking for the place or looking for something that's in there. On the solar side of it, what we currently have in there does not allow you to do any solar within the T-Bod, or you can do just the rooftop?
Oh, we can't do either,
You can't do any.
correct.
So what you're proposing is to allow you to do solar in the T-Bod.
Right, consistent with Section 26 that allows it all over the city. And then we had, one proposed revision was that along I-93, that there not be any setback, because as you look at the plan, you can see the distance, the property sits lower than the highway. So that was the only difference that we've requested.
Okay. And right now, you can't do any of that?
No.
It's not allowed?
We thought we could, but, building commissioner indicated that because of that language, when you read it, it's conflicting language. It's, on one hand, it looks like it gives you wiggle room to do it, then on the other hand, the language is specific that says any use not mentioned is not permitted.
So if this went through and you were allowed to put solar mounting on the roofs or whatever, what, out of the energy that would be used by the whole facility, the whole area, what percentage would be then used with the solar? Like, how much does that, if 100% is what the energy is, would this constitute 50% of the energy by being able to go solar throughout the whole facility?
I'm not sure, Chad, would you have a handle on it? And I just want to state that we're going to make this available to, the people who have approvals there. So, some of them may take advantage of it, some of them may not.
So you would have to go to the assisted living facility and they would have to say, okay, yeah, no, we want to go with this. We want to do it. As of right now, you could get this approved and have nobody there say, we want anything to do with any solar panels or anything.
Actually, I'd jump in there. It's, both LCS, the senior housing folks, and Pulte, the residential folks, are excited about the opportunity to put solar on certain of the rooftops, and they've been sort of pushed heavily in that direction. So it's actually been written into their special permits that they should endeavor to bring PV to their projects, and they're looking to do so. And then for ourselves, it's the right thing to do. The buildings sort of are expected to have it nowadays, so as these commercial buildings come up, where practical and applicable, we are going to try to have as much solar on those roofs as possible. But both of the folks that are sort of already underway and committed do intend to, or certainly hope to, put solar on their projects. And as to the percentage, I can't speak to that. It's not 50%, it's well below that, but it's a step in the right direction. It's a commitment to utilizing existing technologies, and as panels get better, the percentages go up. But it's lower than that. I think Joe had a good stat from what would have been MGBs, where it was taking care of plug loads, but I shouldn't hazard to guess, but it's certainly not 100, it's not 50, it's somewhere below, but it's more than zero, and it's an important step in the right direction.
Okay, I'm good.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. Are there any other questions or comments? Carolyn?
Yes, through the chair, Attorney Tarby. The photograph that depicts the two off-premises signs, one's identified as the Vale and the other one's on the right-hand side, is that what you anticipate those two signs will be, one on each side?
Yeah.
Correct?
Do you anticipate signs generally that would look like this? This one probably smaller, but,
That one would be smaller, but that's certainly what is designed right there on the right, on the McDonald's side.
yeah, so the one on the right is probably spot on. The one on the left, it looks larger than what is allowed under the
Okay.
zoning. But, they're gonna be classy signs. They're not gonna be like some of the signs you see around the city.
I have no doubt. But so my question, my second question is though, these two signs that are off premises are not going to include the names or the identity of the individual addresses and or businesses, correct?
Well, we're looking to add up to 6 business names.
On
Okay.
these, okay.
Right.
And would both have the same names and addresses, or are you doing 6 on each for each side?
No, I think our desire would be to cap it at 6. We think that's appropriate for both the owners in the back and any significant tenant. We don't see a need or a desire to list, should there be multitudes or multiple more, 6 would be appropriate. And it would be, should it
Each side?
materialize as 2 signs, it would be the same on both sides.
Right, and again, like, for example, the senior housing is called and Delaney, so it would be the Delaney at the Vale. Pulte's development is called Highlands at the Vale. So it would be a name like that, not, townhouse condominium. It would just be the name of the development. And if they happen to be a, large GMP manufacturing company, you say it was Moderna or something, that it would say Moderna.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are you set, Carolyn?
I am, thank you.
All right, and I saw Mike.
Yeah, along the same lines as Scowen was going, would there be an instance, say, we say AL Prime owns the land out front, what if they say, well,
Well, they say
could you
no.
put our name on it too, or?
If they say no, then
Well, not that they would say, say they agree to it, but the stipulation would be, could you put their name on it?
no,
Would
no,
that be a possibility?
no,
Same
absolutely,
thing with McDonald's, where you see the golden arches on that sign.
no, absolutely not. It would just be the Vale, related to the Vale.
And as far as the photovoltaic, arrays that you're gonna have there, what associated equipment would go with that? What do you envision, if it went through what your client would like to see out there, what type of equipment would be required to support all that? And is there, obviously you don't have a plan for it now, because it's not in the plans, but what would that entail?
Good question. We have these on other industrial buildings in the city, office buildings in the city. You want to take a shot at that, Chad?
I guess I'd ask the question back. I'm not sure what you mean, honestly, as far as.
So, say if you get these arrays out there, solar arrays, and, the equipment that's required to support all that, is it transformers and whatnot? I guess, right now, we're just thinking the arrays, and,
Are you speaking specifically to the ones on the rooftops?
yeah,
Yeah, okay. So on top of a roof, you would see flush-mounted solar panels, and to the general passerby, everything else would be invisible. You would route your panels back down to the electrical closet, if you will. There'd be a little bit of an inverter.
so it wouldn't be much more than, as far as extra equipment, wouldn't
no,
be much
no,
more
no.
than what's currently would be there without it.
Correct. It would be all but invisible,
Okay.
but for the panels. And the panels, as you're seeing them, they're getting flusher and better and thinner and, more invisible. So you have to put yourself in LCS's shoes. They're looking to put only the best-looking thing on their brand-new $90 million building. And everything else is just internal to the guts of the building,
Okay.
if that answers your question.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just trying to get a visual of
Sure.
that. Mind. Thank you.
Okay, are you good? All right, are there more questions for Attorney Tarby? So Joe, I have a question. I see, and I remember from the approval of these various projects that there was, a driveway in and then a sort of long looping road. My question is, understanding that the signage issue is to help people find their way into this development from Montville Ave. The reality is that most motorists have GPS, and they go where their GPS says they go. So my question to you is, each of the individual businesses in the Vale presumably has a street address that would be on their stationery that they're, a GPS would go to. Is that Hill Street? Is that something else? Because, and so that's the first part of my question. And the reason that I'm asking it is if we decide, okay, freestanding signs, generally we're not in favor, but for this purpose, we understand it would help motorists or, people coming in find this place. Knowing, though, that most people use GPS, what on the sign helps them? If it says the Vale, that's not necessarily helpful if the Vale isn't part of the address that people are looking for. So that's the reason I'm asking the question. What would be the addresses of these various buildings? And how does that relate to what is on the signage?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And correct me, Chad, if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that, Brian Murray of Legg McCall's been working with Tom Quinn on addresses, or the fire department, and the game plan is to, Hill Street would be Hill Street, and then the Ring Road is going to be named after a veteran. And the suggestion was made that the numbering should be similar to Unicorn Park. So at Unicorn Park, you have there's Unicorn Park Drive, and you have 100 Unicorn Park through 700 Unicorn Park. So I think the idea would be, 100, somehow bring the Vale into it, 100 Veteran, Ave, Woburn, Mass. But I don't think that's all been finalized, but your point's well taken, and I'll make sure I pass that along.
Because I'm less enthusiastic about names of businesses for the purpose of letting people know where they are. I'm sort of less enthusiastic about that, and more enthusiastic about tying in to what people might actually have typed into their GPS.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah,
I think it's a good point.
please.
And we agree, and I think that goes to the importance of the wayfinding sign out at Hill Street. If you think of sort of somebody affirming that they've gotten to the right place, say coming off of the 93 South off ramp, and they've plugged in Delaney at the Vale, XXX, to be named street, they don't see that street name on Hill Street, right? They're seeing Hill Street, and the street would change once you get to the roundabout and then head up to the Delaney development. So having Delaney at the Vale on that monument sign, even absent a street address, allows somebody who has plugged that into their GPS to say, okay, I'm going the right way because I don't see a street name consistent with what I've plugged in at that intersection.
I understand your point, but I think that some work needs to be done around this, because the Vale is a lovely marketing name for your development. I get that. But what each individual business does with that name would make a difference as to how effective that sign is going to be. So if you're making a representation that the businesses in this development all will have, Delaney at the Vale and Pulte at the Vale and blah, blah, blah at the Vale, therefore the Vale is a good thing to put on this sign. You see my point? Like,
I do.
Okay, but that's my point, that if we're going to say, yes, okay, you get an off-premise sign because we agree that people need help finding this place, then I just want to make sure that it's actually helpful.
Understand your question.
Okay, thank you. All right. Are there any other questions for Attorney Tarby before I open up the public hearing? All right, seeing none. This is a public hearing. If there is anybody in attendance who wishes to speak on this project, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please. All right, I am seeing no one at this time. So we have a public hearing that has been opened. We have 3 requests that have been made, all of which seem to have a variety of issues attached to them. At this point, if there are no further comments or discussion from the board, I would turn to the planning board director for some recommendations.
Happy to offer some comments and suggestions. So on the notion of the signs, I too struggled with the sort of GPS scenario and still struggle a bit as to why somebody can't just drive Montvale and turn onto Hill Street and then see the Vale open up in front of them. But I recognize that there may be some utility to having some advance warning in the form of a off-premise sign. My issue, I think, with the signs is severalfold. One is I'm not convinced that 2 are needed. It's the way that's worded, it's one freestanding sign per lot, and they've identified two, but the state parking lot is a third. And I don't have any reason to think that they're thinking about a third sign, but I'm not convinced that two are necessary. If in fact you need to identify it for the traveling public, I think you can do that maybe effectively with one. The other thing to mention is there's nothing in the ordinance or the draft as written that would limit them to 6, and there's nothing that would require them to use the same 6 on each sign, although that's clearly what they say is their intent. There's nothing that would actually require them to do that as it's currently written. Those are, I guess, my last comment slash question or issue will be this. I think it was Bob that mentioned, he said the signs are very nice looking, and they are. But I think maybe one of the reasons they're nice looking is that they don't have a lot of words on them identifying 6 businesses, so I guess I'm unconvinced, but it's not my call, obviously, as to the necessity of a directory sign out here, because that's essentially what it might be. But certainly question whether there should be 2 of them. Maybe 1 is sufficient. With respect to the changes relative to the T-bod and the solar, I'll point out that I think we need to change the citation in Exhibit A's 2.1, where you're restating Section 28.3, and there's new language shown in bold. It would allow, or it would add wording that would allow an accessory use not otherwise permitted. I think it should say by Section 28.6.1.19. That's the T-bod. But I'd let the attorney have an opportunity to look it up and agree. I am not a fan of the ground-mounted solar. It's not a popular stand to take, certainly from an environmental perspective and a cost perspective. They have a lot of attractiveness to property owners, but they are not pretty, and they would be in many cases, in many spots, visible from 93, if not from Montvale, certainly from 93. And not nice looking once you get into the development too. Just because you can't see it from a public way doesn't mean it's pretty or not pretty. With respect to the amendment that's sub 3, or III on the second page, there was a suggestion that wording be added to the end of section 28633, except as authorized by a special permit pursuant to section 28.3. I'm concerned about that because as amended, the phrase would then be this. In amongst the list of uses not permitted, it would say the following: any use not expressly authorized by this section, which is what it says now, but it would say any use not expressly authorized by this section, except as authorized by a special permit pursuant to section 28.3. So I think what that says is you can't have any use that's not expressly authorized unless the council decides it's going to authorize it, and then you could have it. I think it opens up a huge can of worms. I don't think that was the intent, and I'm wondering if maybe tweaking the wording to say any use not expressly authorized by this section except for accessory uses as may be authorized by a special permit pursuant to section 28.3 might alleviate a lot of that concern. I think that's in summary what my issues are.
All right. So my understanding is that this is before the council, I believe, next week. It doesn't strike me that there is a detailed line-by-line recommendation from the planning director currently. Some of the discussion tonight has certainly informed what some members think about the sign issue in particular. With regard to the solar issue, I don't get an overriding sense that members have a problem with, all solar all the time. However, the ground-mounted solar is clearly an issue that's been pointed out to our attention. So to move this process forward, it might make sense if there are responses to what you've heard the planning board director say. It might make sense to put those forward so that we can talk about what any concerns are on this, and if we do end up continuing this matter for working out the details, then we have a basis for doing that. Does that make sense? All right, Bob.
Maybe I read it wrong, but it sounds to me like you don't have a real big problem with most of this, almost all of it, other than things that are being left out, or like with the signs. You're not really big on the signs, but your fear is if they put 2, you might be okay with it, if that's what it said, that was a limitation, but you're afraid there's gonna be more to it.
Well, a couple things, just to be clear. So the last thing I think Montvale needs is more signage. But I also recognize that the last thing we need is a development, if there really are people that can't find it by street name and GPS. So I'm not opposed to certainly one sign, I think makes some sense. But I'm concerned about whether there needs to be 2 of them. Why isn't one enough? And I'm concerned that the language is currently written doesn't limit the number of businesses that could be identified on that sign. If I had my druthers, there wouldn't be any businesses identified. It would say the Vale at Hill Street or whatever the new name is, and that should be enough. It may be that, I forget the name of the firm that you mentioned, Joe, but I'll pick on Mass General, MGB, because I remember them. Why couldn't they say we're at XYZ Street to be named, and have that be on the monument sign, rather than the names of as many as perhaps 6 businesses or more? So, sorry, I'm getting a little off track. The potential, the fact that there's no maximum number of businesses that could be identified on the sign is an issue for me, as is the number of signs, 2 versus just 1.
And if you're concerned with it, I'm concerned with it also. I'm concerned with anything you're concerned with. Seriously. On the solar side of it, this might seem a little harsh, but who cares what it looks like? We're to the point now, I don't want to get on a bandwagon here or anything, but
Get on it.
we're to the point now where who cares? We're draining the environment, we're killing everything. If we've got somebody that wants to put solar and we don't like the way it looks on the ground, I'm beyond that now. Just in terms of the solar side of it, I feel just allow it, because it should be everywhere. Then we can put fans up in the air and have them, heat all of Woburn also and stuff. Put a big dam down at Horn Pond, but anyways, I am concerned about the things that you've mentioned, the things that you are concerned with also, so.
Are you set, Bob?
I am, yeah.
All right, Dave, I was looking at you, so you get next.
Tina, through the chair. They present this photograph or this drawing or rendering of what the road will look like. Is that what the road will look like? So are we just seeing 2 signs and that isn't what the road's gonna look like? But is it really gonna be this 5-lane, 4-lane
Yes.
thing, which is actually wonderful for that area, believe me?
Yes, I believe that's accurately drawn,
Yeah.
as I recall it.
So we're looking at that. I'm still having a problem with the signs that we see are on the ground, but they have the capacity to actually put them up in the air, and that is a thing that would make me not want to vote for this, because I am just not confident that we're not gonna see 10-foot stanchions. Technically 20-foot stanchions that would raise this sign up in the air. because it's 100 square feet, the sign's 10 feet tall, they can go up to 30 feet. We've been, we've had this happen to us before where what we thought we got wasn't what we got. And I just have this image in my brain of this sign, and then we have these six little things hanging off the bottom that says, Gadoodle and Manoodle, or whatever it says, but it's got, you know what I mean? It just,
There must be, I think with a little bit of thought, there's got to be a way to craft a provision that's clearly not, that Chad Reynolds has said that that's not their intent. They have something else in their mind. But I also hear what you say. There must be a way for us to craft a little bit of wording that could alleviate your concern and prevent that from happening.
right. And the other thing with PV, as you know, I'm on the board, the electrical board for the Commonwealth, and anything that we do that stops burning carbon, I'm all for. But I am concerned, I have seen a lot of, we all talk about PV, and out in the water, we talk about wind power, but there's a whole lot of other stuff out there that's coming. And I just want to make sure that we don't give by right other things that we haven't really thought about. They have these things, they're wind powered, they're not the propellers, they're these little whirly-giggy type of things. They use algorithms to design the tube, and it generates electricity like you can't believe, but they make noise. So I know you're not talking about that, but I just want to make sure all we're talking about is the PV thing, and there's no other technology unless they go to the council to make sure, you know what I'm saying? So we don't have something else. So the sign is important to me, and the idea that and I agree with you, I don't care what it looks like on the ground, as long as my neighbor doesn't put one in his backyard and I have to look at it off my porch. But for this, it's gonna be at 93, and they're all coming down from New Hampshire anyway, so it doesn't matter. I don't say that in a mean way, but they're passing through, they're going by it, people are driving by that, so I don't care. And the rooftop, nobody looks. And as to the question of the mechanics, I have never seen any of the mechanics visible on any of these PV units, because the way they're designed, it's actually into the building, and all that stuff takes place inside. So, but the sign thing, I'm still having a problem with that.
Okay, are you set?
I'm good.
Thank you. Jim?
Yes, couple of comments. My concern, similar to Dave's, is the 30-foot height. I'm 100% against that. I think 12-foot max would satisfy what they're depicting and bring it more in line. I would like to see a layout of a ground level proposal of the PV system. I'm not a fan of that. I think it brings us a different set of problems, that you're gonna have site limitations depending on where you put them. So you're giving them a carte blanche option on where they wanna go. Let's see it laid out. They've gone through the exercise of trying to estimate what kind of savings there would be. There must be a concept out there that they're thinking about where they're gonna put them if they're considering the ground level. The rooftop, I take no exception to. I just wanna make sure that, for a size development of this magnitude, that it's appealing, not only to the people that live there, work there, but the commuters that go by, so we don't look like Route 1, all right? And all the neon signs and everything that goes by there. Because the impression that people get of Woburn is what they see going by on the window. And I'd rather not see, the Mass Pike with all the PV panels along every exit ramp. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else okay, Mike?
I agree with David, Bob, and Jim. I'm not against really any of this. I just think it needs to be buttoned up along the lines, as the director was mentioning. There were some loopholes that kind of need to be closed with, what could be allowed. As far as, and Jim brought up a good point about a site plan, so my only concern is with the ground-mounted solar panels. With the way it's written right now, wouldn't come in front of us, it would go in front of the city council. What would be put in front of them so that they would have a better understanding of what's actually gonna be built there? Is there, I guess, is there gonna be some sort of site plan required before it gets put in, or is it just them saying you can allow that?
It would be, the section that they would propose to amend would be to section 2861. I just want to make sure and confirm it as I say it out loud. And section 2861 are uses that are allowed by right with site plan review. So
Okay,
they would have to go to the city council to get site plan review, not a special permit, but a plan that would show where they're placing it and how.
and I would have to believe the applicant would not put anything that's gonna be ugly or persuade anybody not to put residents in there. I mean, as far as a company or whatever, so
Well, would it be the developer, or could it be the individual property owner? Like, when Pulte does their application for solar, will that be submitted by Leggett and McCall, or, I mean, Monfair Land LLC? Or will it be it could be a petition directly from the owner of the property? So to your question about,
Yeah.
Overall,
aesthetics.
yeah. Do you have a thought? Just wondering about,
Do I have a thought on that?
no, I was wondering if if there was a reaction from
Um,
the petitioner.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, who would be, would it be one of the tenants that would come in front of the city council and say, can I put one here? Or is that something that's gonna be more involved on a higher level?
Well, the special permit petition at the city council requires the petition to be signed off by the landowner. So a tenant could file for something, but it's gonna be signed off by the landowner.
You guys would all have to be on the same page.
Yep.
Right. So really, that's pretty much my concerns. I don't think anything obtrusive or ugly. I mean, they're not the best looking things, but as Bob pointed out, it's kinda, we gotta do something. And as far as the signage goes, I think obviously if we put in site restrictions and, height restriction, I don't have a problem with 2, 3 is kinda pushing it. That's it, so so where do we go from here? Are we in a position to draft up a recommendation based on all this? I'm not really sure.
Well, I think Carolyn had her hand up, if you're done,
I'm
Mike,
done.
with your comments.
I did through
Um,
the chair, but Attorney Tabby may have answered it when we were discussing whether it would be up to the tenants to request the location of the ground PVs, whether it be the individual tenants or not. Is that something that the developer would be able to hold the right to if there were separate leases? And I don't know the answer to that. For example, if there was some type of, in the lease, some type of contingency that would have certain locations or restrictions as to where they could be located.
Right now, the properties, LCS owns their lot. Pulte, have you closed on that? Yeah, that'll be closed soon. So let's say it's LCS, they would own the property, so they'd have complete control over what they decide to do. If it's on land of which Leggett McCall still owns, the tenant would have to get permission from Leggett McCall to do it. But, just to roll back to the carports, and again, correct me, Chad, if this is not accurate, but the only group that requested the right to do solar carports was MGB. Okay, they've withdrawn their proposal, and it's not going forward. So right now, Pulte's looking to do rooftop, LCS is looking to do rooftop, and as Chad indicated, their life science campus would be looking to do rooftop. So there's nothing pending right now on the solar carports. But our suggestion was, because of the benefits of the economy, instead of banning them or prohibiting them, allow them by special permit. Now, the other thing I wanted to address, and I'm, if the board's ready to move along, comment suggestions to the city council is that after hearing, different comments on the sign, we're going to, propose the following. That there be one sign, that it be a monument sign, no stanchions, and that it be no higher than 10 feet. But, we're still, proposing to have up to 6 businesses, names on the sign. So I don't know if that helps the board in moving this along.
Did you say a maximum 10-foot high?
I'm sorry?
Did you say a maximum 10-foot high?
Correct. So you'd probably be looking at a sign, like the one on McDonald's. But, there could be, final language could include language that any such sign shall be a monument sign no more than 10 feet high and shall contain the name of not more than 6 businesses or something to that effect. You do have the ability to make that suggestion or recommendation.
Okay. So I'm getting the sense that the devil here is in the details, that I'm hearing general agreement as to at least one freestanding sign. I'm hearing general agreement as to solar with particular reservations about ground arrays that might be well served by carving out and maybe making, something a little bit more regulatory on ground arrays as opposed to any rooftop. So if you were still looking for ground arrays, that's still a little bit of a stumbling block for people. And then I also heard the closing of loopholes, that the planning board director has identified several areas where the wording that's suggested might broaden the ability of anyone in the T-BOD to bring forth all sorts of uses, and that may not be the intent of either the petitioner or the board. So the devil here is in the details. The general ideas that you've expressed, that your petitioner is looking for, seem to be, something that the board is willing to, work with and entertain. But all of us have been here a long time, and we're all wary of the details. I think that is pretty clear. So would it make sense to ask the planning board director to synthesize our discussion into a draft ordinance that we would be willing to recommend to the city council? And I wouldn't ask her to do that sitting here. All right, I see some nodding. I'm seeing some nodding.
Can't write it right now?
She is a very fast writer and very professional in her ability to put quality work forward, but I think that's asking a little bit much. So I would make a suggestion, if a board member wished to make a motion to continue the public hearing to our next meeting, which is May 10th, I believe, that if Tina thought that was sufficient time
Yes.
to craft an ordinance with wording changes appropriate to this discussion, then we might be able to move that along on May 10th. Does that work for people? I see some nodding, so therefore, if anyone wishes to make a motion, I would certainly entertain that. Mike?
I'd love to make that motion, but before I do so, when is the city council hearing this? Is it next week?
It's next Tuesday.
Wouldn't we want this before that?
Well, I mean, the city council can obviously choose to move it next Tuesday, or they can choose to wait for us. I
They have
just
to-
don't think that we are in a position to craft a finely worded ordinance responsive to the comments that we've heard today, tonight. So it would be up to them, of course. Tina.
Just to put a fine point on it, the law actually requires that the city council wait for your recommendation. So you have to hold a public hearing. You have 21 days after the close of your hearing to get your report to the council.
Whether they like it or not?
Yes.
Oh, goodness, well, all righty then. The law is
They'll
the
start the
law.
hearing, and then they'll continue it and hope that your recommendation comes in the interim.
Okay, all righty. So if that is something the board would like to do, I would entertain a motion.
So moved?
All right, there is a motion by Mike to continue the public hearing in this matter to our next meeting, which is May 10th. Is there a second?
I'll second the so move.
At 7 PM?
At 7 PM, and that is a second by Bob. Is there any further discussion?
Right here?
Yep, Dave.
So when we vote on this, we're voting on even though we have two distinct different things that we're worried about, PV and signage, it would all come under one vote.
And loopholes.
Right, so it would all.
There's three.
Right, so three things. We wouldn't be voting three different things. We'd be voting one vote to include everything.
We would, but one would hope that if there were any members with particular issues as to the draft that comes up, that we could resolve them and vote on the whole thing. It's coming to us as one proposal, so we would probably wish to send it out as one.
Thank you.
Okay, all set? All right, any further discussion? Oh, Mike.
For clarification, also to continue the public hearing?
Yes, that was the motion to continue the public hearing on this matter to May 10th at 7 PM.
Gotcha.
All right, so there was a motion by Mike, there was a second by Bob. No further discussion. I would ask for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. 2, 3, 7 in favor, none opposed. This matter is continued to our meeting on May 10th at 7 PM. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is Robertson Way subdivision, discussion of potential bond revocation.
I'll give you a brief summary to let you know where we came, unless Attorney Salvati, you want to take it all, or you want me to do the intro?
You relax.
All right, you take it.
Attorney Salvati, welcome.
Welcome. Good to see you all. Attorney Mark Salvati, 57 Arlington Road. We've been working diligently, I think, on Robinson Way. We have a as-built plan in place that has been reviewed by the Water Department and the DPW chairman. There were some field changes that have been recommended and we think are sufficient and have been okayed by those two departments, and we're hopeful that we can now report that the as-built is basically official and would ask for it to be approved that way. So that's where we are. Be glad to take any questions, or if Tina has anything to add on that.
Tina.
Well, it is, the A&R, the as-built plan has been reviewed by engineering and found to be complete. They made some changes and they responded to the revisions appropriately. And we also have received certification, I believe, from the engineer, the design engineer. Or, I'm sorry, not the design engineer, but the civil engineer.
Civil
that's-
engineer.
So I think Mark's right, there is room and right for the planning board to consider voting to accept the as-built plan that's been offered. With respect to the other issues, there were three things that were identified in the field on the as-built as having changed from the approved plan, but DPW indicated that they had both been approved as field changes at the time by the personnel that was in place. So your acceptance of the as-built would be essentially accepting those field deviations based on their acceptability to city staff. It's good news because those were the last remaining things that were left to be done with this subdivision. And we were originally concerned when we first read Mr. Rayom's letter that some of those field deviations might require correction. But the good news is that they don't. So if you accept the as-built tonight, then I would suggest to Mr. Salvati that his client, or that he write on behalf of his client, for our next meeting, I request for you to consider releasing the bond money. Then we do have some bond left for this project, and it will be due back to the developer, and it will be essentially the closeout of the subdivision, which would be a nice milestone to reach.
All right, so just so I understand, what your recommendation would be that the board consider accepting the as-built plan tonight.
Yes.
Is there any reason why we couldn't release all the remaining bond monies? Or does there need to be a written request?
Well, it's customary to have a written request. I can't say that it's essential.
Well, if we never wanted to see this on the agenda again,
Well, that's what you would do. And I don't think there's anything I could
I
have
would-
possibly missed.
I would make an oral request if that, to
Yeah,
return the bond.
maybe we can handle it tonight. I feel comfortable that engineering and DPW have been looking at this so carefully and so closely for the last couple of months that there's no chance that there's something that we missed at this point. So I think the board could certainly entertain the idea of doing both.
all right. That suggestion has been placed on the floor for any board member to either comment on or take up. Bob?
I'm guessing the first part would be to make a motion to accept the as-built plan.
All right, motion by Bob to accept the as-built plan for Robertson Way. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Carolyn. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's 7 in favor, none opposed. That motion carries. Is there another motion?
I'd like to make a motion to release all the remaining bond monies.
All right, motion by Bob to release the remaining bond surety on Robertson Way subdivision. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'd ask for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, none opposed. We are done with Robertson Way. Thank you. Thank you all. All right, Carlson Way subdivision, expiration of construction, completion date. Mr. Salvati.
I will remind you, before you lay into me on this, that my granddaughter is in attendance here. So please don't pick on me too much in front of her.
Nicely done. Nicely done, Attorney Salvati.
Is that why she came?
That's why she's here. Protection. No, so on Carlson, when we got into this a few months ago, I was not officially hired. I have been so hired. I hope that gives you somewhat of a level of comfort that we get this done. This is not as close as we would hope it would be to being done, and there were quite a few delays in getting where we are. However, they have done some borings out there and determined that the loom is not overly thick on the easement area. If you recall, there's an easement area that runs beside Mr. Hegarty's property. There was supposed to be a gate on it. It was supposed to be gravelled. It was loomed and seeded over, and so it's a nice lawn now. I think the city solicitor has said that you possibly could not take that lawn up, even if you wanted to. But Jay Duran has issued a memo, which came out April 22nd, stating that he is actually comfortable with it as is, and is comfortable with no gate if certain parameters are met, one of which is an apron and a curb cut that goes along with that, as well as some obvious bounds to indicate where the easement is for emergency vehicles to get down there. So what I've suggested is a request to continue this to June so that we can hopefully agree and install the apron. We do need the permission for some of these things from Mr. Hegarty, who's represented by Attorney Tarby, and they are in discussions with us. Again, we just got the memo, I think, on Friday, and we got a memo from Greg yesterday or today with a few other things that we have to place onto the plan, but we are moving forward. I will address one item which was a concern of the director, which was a second curb cut on the lot, and I've been informed, at least orally, from the building department that although your maximum curb cut could be 24 feet for a single-family home, and we would end up with about 40 feet here because of the two, they would not consider an easement for emergency vehicles as a driveway curb cut, therefore it could be allowed. We're even going to keep a little lip on it just in case it's needed and to try to prevent others from pulling in. So with that, I'd be glad to take any questions, and again, my request is to go to June, I think, 24th, so that we have some time to install the apron and the cement and get those bounds put in. And I think the only other thing we'd need is an as-built plan with the changes recommended by Greg.
All right, Attorney Salvati. So If there is a possibility of you working the same Robertson Way magic on Carlson Way, I think we would not, certainly, you don't need your granddaughter's protection.
All right.
Under the circumstances, if that is possible, what would be a meeting in June?
Right now, I think we're, hold on, scheduled for June 14 and June 28th.
All right.
So the last.
The
one
last,
would be the
yeah,
June
I
28th.
think we need 60 days to get this done.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
would say take all of that, given the track record.
All right, so given that Robertson Way we never have to see again, and we did that first, and now we're on Carlson Way,
I'm under the gun.
I'm just pointing out.
So be it.
What is the will of the board? Is there discussion?
I think Jim had a
Oh,
question.
Jim,
Question, through the chair, what's the status, wasn't there a sidewalk that still needed to be replaced?
Yeah, there's a small section of sidewalk that wasn't finished where they weren't sure what kind of a driveway they would be, but right at the easement. And there's some curbing that will need to be installed somehow
Yeah.
along that sidewalk.
And he's agreed to do all that. I think he wanted to do it all at once.
Well, don't you think at this point where the expiration, or was approval in 2012, we've exhausted that?
Sure.
You see any reason why we should wait any longer to complete the sidewalk and not deal with the one individual item that's in question?
So is there a missing sidewalk since the beginning of the subdivision? Is it, or,
Well, they left this piece undone because they weren't sure how it was gonna be finished off. Was DPW gonna have a driveway entrance into
so
the
it's
easement?
it's part and parcel of the apron that I've been discussing,
I'm
isn't it?
sorry.
I believe this is on Wyman Street.
Oh,
I don't know.
no, I
I
don't,
believe we want to go back and check it out. There's no other open items other than the driveway between the lot for Mr. Haggerty and the city that they're trying to iron out. That all other items are completed.
I don't know of a piece missing
Sense
on
the
Wyman.
frustration from these two projects with the same developer.
Yeah.
And the lack of attention to them has really gotten to be overwhelming.
Well, I'd ask you to give me 60 days on that as well. I mean, only because I really wasn't involved, and now I am, and I think he's taking it much more seriously, but that's up to the board. I don't know, are you suggesting that you take the bond money and finish that piece without us?
I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see the applicant, if that is an open item, deal with it forthright. All right, pull the little bit aside what we're talking about, if it's still open,
Okay. It's on Wyman?
it should be less than a week's work.
Is it on Wyman?
I believe that it was.
Okay.
Tina?
So I know a little bit about this because I had characterized it as an unfinished sidewalk too. We'd need to run it to the ground to be sure. But I had looked at the plan after I had made that statement a couple of times. And I'm not sure, there is a section of sidewalk. Some of it's, in front of the subdivision is concrete. But as it gets close to Rose Farm, is that the name of the street?
Yep.
There's a segment that's bituminous concrete, just plain asphalt. And when I looked at the plan, I think that there wasn't a requirement that the concrete sidewalk go all the way to Rose Farm Lane. I think it ended in a certain spot on the plan. And I think that the developers did go in and put some pavement down, but they didn't do the concrete because that wasn't what was required. But we should run that to the ground and be certain of it, because I have in fact in the
Sure.
past given you conflicting info on that.
All right. I agree that we should discuss that and figure out what, if something needs to be done, then when we can do it, we'll do that.
All right, so the petitioner is requesting a continuance of this matter to June 28th. Whether or not that needs to be, quote, to schedule a discussion on a possible bond revocation, that is certainly going to be up to the will of the board. So I would be looking for a motion as to what the will of the board is on what we call this enlargement of time and how long we will give.
I'm regretting the way I worded it. I think it could just be that the board continue discussion of the completion of the Carlson Way subdivision to the June 28th meeting. And we can discuss what we need to discuss that night, depending on what we know then.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Bob, is there a second? Second by Dave, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, none opposed. Mr. Salvati, we will see you June 28th, and we have high, high hopes. Have a good night.
Mr. Salvati, she should write a very good civics paper now.
All right, next on the agenda is Planning Director's Update.
Not much for the board this evening. I want to let you know, I apologize for not having finalized the proposal on the fees. I'll remain hopeful that I'll be able to do that for, if not the very next meeting, then certainly one of them in May. Speaking of the May meetings, the board's next meeting is scheduled for May 10th at 7 PM. Carlson Way will not be on that agenda, but what we have right now scheduled would be the discussion of the zoning amendment that we heard earlier this evening. And right now, that would be the only item of business for the board to discuss.
So, Tina, you had suggested that it might be potentially wise to schedule May 10th as a virtual meeting. I would be in favor of that. Could I just get a sense as to the will of the board? So I see a nod.
It might be the only way, I can't go physically.
Oh, perfect. Then
but I-
you might be able to
May
zoom in.
be able to fit it in
Okay.
virtually.
All right, seeing no aversion to that, then we will schedule the May 10th meeting for a virtual meeting, and it will start at 7 PM. All right.
Excellent.
So if that was the sum and substance of the update, I would go to approval of minutes. We have draft minutes of the March 22nd, 2022 meeting. If members have reviewed them, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to accept.
Motion to accept the minutes by Dave. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'd call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, none opposed. Those minutes are approved. Are there other business matters that may legally come before the board not known at the time of posting?
Not from staff.
All right. We have reached the end of our agenda. I see adjournment as the next motion. Would someone like to make that motion?
Make a motion to adjourn at 8:32?
Motion to adjourn by Carolyn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mike. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'd call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, none opposed. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you all on May 10th, virtually.
And will the Celtics still be winners?
Oh, predicting the future is so hard, Dave. So hard.